So good evening. My name is Bev Hunter. I'm a member of the Mississippi Mills All My Relations group that we are sponsoring this event. And I want to welcome all of you. Just as a highlight, people are here from near and far. I think the farthest is Whitehorse and Victoria, pretty far also. And where we are located is in Mississippi Mills is a township in Lanark County, just outside of Ottawa. And so how our group formed is just after Truth and Reconciliation, there was a number of us who would be meeting up in these little towns where we are and saying, what's going on with reconciliation? And I don't know, I haven't heard of anything. And it was like, uh-oh, I guess it's up to us. We're going to have to do something. And so we formed a group to really focus on educational events related to supporting reconciliation. And in the early days, we spoke with Elder Larry McDermott about getting some advice and input from him about what we might be able to do to support reconciliation. And he said, well, you know, some people say it's really about renewing our friendships. And that really struck a bell with us. And so that's been one of our guiding principles or guiding stars. And so over the last 5 years, we've had a series of events. This is our first Zoom, and I want to say welcome. I see there's 86 folks here. So welcome. And we're the other thing that's really exciting about this is also our first event with sign language interpreters, because another thing that we determined was we wanted to be sure that Indigenous and non-Indigenous deaf and hearing impaired people had access to information about reconciliation. And so you see tonight we have actually an English language sign language person and a French language sign language person, and we have a team, and there's actually there's another 2 interpreters. They take turns through our event. So we're most happy to be able to be doing this. I want to start now with the land acknowledgement, and is it possible for us to do a screen share? Joanna, we don't have a very big screen to put a screen share on, I guess. So we're not going to do a screen share, just looking at what this looks like.
Sorry to interrupt. If you screen share, it will be full screen, so we can do that if you want.
Will there be a place for the interpreter?
That I'm not sure, to be honest.
So let's not take any chances on losing our interpreter, the view of our interpreters. So I will read this, and this comes from this is the official land acknowledgement statement used by the Township of Mississippi Mills. It was written in 2020 by Mayor Lowry in consultation with Elder Larry and the support of Councillor Jan Maydan and representatives from Mississippi Mills All My Relations. We acknowledge that this is sacred land on which Mississippi Mills is now located. It has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We're grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and the water in order that we might meet here today. Before settlers arrived, this territory was subject to Dish with a 1 spoon wampum belt covenant, an agreement between Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee nations to peaceably share and care for resources. After settlers arrived, it became subject to the 3-figure wampum belt, last carried by Algonquin Elder William Commanda, which commemorates the sharing of this land with English, French, and Indigenous nations under the governance of natural law. We recognize with gratitude the knowledge and contributions that the Algonquin peoples bring to the municipality of Mississippi Mills. Today, Mississippi Mills is also home to other Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. So our topic tonight is treaties. Treaties are alive. This is a statement that Elder Larry McDermott has made. And in some of our promotion, we also say all people, all of us are treaty people. And Elder Larry is going to focus on treaties and how they support a sustainable relationship with our Mother Earth, the Earth. Also, we're going to hear a little bit about Plenty Canada, the organization that Larry works with, their youth program, and we're going to have a question and answer period in the second half of our time together. We will be finishing at 9 o'clock. And I want to express our gratitude. There are many people and many organizations that made tonight possible. Firstly, Plenty Canada hosting the Zoom. And secondly, St. Paul's Anglican Church here in the town of Almont. We're under their wing administratively, I say. Can you imagine being under the wing of a church? We are. And also the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa has a group called All My Relations Working Committee, which has inspired us and also supports us. And in part, they are helping support us with the sign language interpreting, making our programs available to deaf and hard of hearing people. Also, Canadian Association of the Deaf and their youth programs helped promote this event, and also they've sponsored the French language, sign language interpreting. And just to mention the Make It Happen people, Lisa Garrett, Serena Elliott, Sue Evans, Pat Coder, Lynn Carroll, Sarah, Andrea, Carmel, all these people are in our group, and they are the people who have been doing all the detail chasing and the promotion and so on and so forth to bring us tonight. And finally, I want to thank all of you for sharing your evening with us, particularly on this very auspicious day, the National Indigenous Peoples Day in this month that focuses on celebrating Indigenous peoples and also, of course, Pride Month. I want to and did I say this? I don't think so. There are people on this call from Whitehorse, Victoria, Burnaby, Edmonton, all around Ottawa, Mississippi Mills, Lanark County, and to the east, Montreal. So there are people from all over. I want to take time now to introduce our moderator tonight, Warden Lowry. She is the warden of Lanark County. She is the mayor of our municipality, Mississippi Mills. She's a member of several municipal associations, rural Ontario municipal boards, and so forth. And other things that I have noticed about her, she's actually a professional musician. And I realized that she has learned about harmony and teamwork in everything she does. And she comes from a respected local farm family, so she's connected to the land here. And she shared a story with us about her grandma Sweeney and an Indigenous family. The dad's name was Joe Bai. And Joe Bai was known as a fiddler. He was a very good craftsman and very respected in the community. And in fact, her grandparents met at a dance that he was hosting. And then his granddaughter was in their wedding party when they got married. And ultimately, when Joe Bai died, he gave his good what do we call it? Driving horse, like a light driving horse, a buggy horse. Very precious to have a good horse like that, and gave that to Warden Lowry's grandma. So these families, two families, were friends, back and forth visiting and very much enjoying each other's company. And this is another inspiration for all of us to remember and to reclaim this kind of relationship and friendship. I think Warden Lowry, over to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bev, for your introduction and your introduction of myself as well. I'd just like to say it was right after the election in 2018 that I had the opportunity to sit down with Bev and with Sue and learn what they do with the Mississippi Mills All My Relations group. And through that, I met Elder Larry and have had the opportunity to work with both the All My Relations group and with Elder Larry over the last few years, and have really appreciated the opportunities that I have had to learn and to, explore my own thinking and my own challenge my own thinking on certain things. And it's really quite an honor to be involved with this event this evening. And I have the pleasure of introducing Elder Larry. So Elder Larry McDermott is an Algonquin elder from the Shabot Obaadjiwan First Nation and is the Executive Director of Plenty Canada, an Indigenous cultural and environmental nonprofit organization. He is a member of numerous organizations, including the International Indigenous Forum for the International Indigenous Forum for Biodiversity, the Canadian Environmental Network, UNESCO, and the Canadian Biosphere Reserve Association. A former three-time mayor, Elder Larry was a council member in Lanark Highlands for almost 30 years. During that time, he was the Warden of Lanark County and served as the first chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Forum. Elder Larry's wide experience also includes being a commissioner for the Ontario Human Rights Commission, serving on the Ontario Species at Risk Public Advisory Committee, and serving as a comprehensive claim representative for Shabot Obaadjiwan First Nation. He's a certified tree marker and butternut assessor and has received an honorary doctorate of laws from the University of Guelph. For many years, Elder Larry was a humble student of the late Algonquin elder, grandfather William Commanda, who created the Circle of All Nations organization. Elder Larry lives in a 170-year-old log home on 500 acres of biologically diverse Algonquin land along the Mississippi River in Lanark County with his wife, Nancy. And I'd like just to add that I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had to work with Elder Larry. And I feel like I'm very fortunate to be able to call him a friend and a mentor. And I think with that, I will pass it over to Elder Larry for what I think we're all looking forward to this evening. And that's a good opportunity to learn and discussion then following on relationship building and building those sustainable relationships with our Mother Earth. So I'll pass that over to you, Larry.
Jimmy Gwitch, thank you, merci beaucoup. Thank you for those kind words, Warden Lowry. And yeah, it's great to be working in the area, in this area, Algonquin territory, and working with people that care and want to see reconciliation happen, including reconciliation, of course, with our Mother Earth. And we'll talk more about that. It's really how Canada was formed. Let me introduce myself in my language. Kwekwe Kakina, Kwe Kijimanadu, Chimigwich, Wamsi Indigenous Cos, Makwan Dotum, Shabot Obaadjiwan First Nation and Digima, Chimigwich, Nik Mashomas Benang, Chimigwich, Nibi Chimigwich, Jojo Aki. And just first of all, I want to thank the life givers that those plants, animals, the water, the air, the earth, and the four winds that have been here for thousands of years and sustain life. Without them, we wouldn't be here. And it's important for us to have a humble and respectful relationship with all species. It was interesting that Canada's conservation vision acknowledged that, but again, more on that in a little bit. And Chimigwich, thank you, and merci beaucoup to each and every one of you who had all kinds of choices of where you could be tonight, but chose to come and share on the important topic of treaties. And we may expand the topic a little bit, but treaties is the foundation of our relationships. In fact, in starting my story here, I noticed that it was said I would start with the Proclamation of 1763. In fact, I'm going to start much earlier, and that's that many Indigenous peoples had treaties with the animals, the medicines that they knew were essential to supporting their lives, supporting their families. And I'm thinking of some of those treaties are being revived. The treaties with the buffalo, in fact, on both sides of what is now the U.S.-Canada border, that treaty is growing very quickly. In the north, you'll find that elders and knowledge keepers talk about the treaty with the caribou. And elsewhere you'll find, whether it's treaty with salmon, those are some of the ones that most of us know about. And in this territory, we have treaties with a number of species. That means we know that they have an iconic importance, that they, in fact, anchor Jinaway Daganuk, or the web of life. We have 7 trees that serve that function, 7 species of trees. We have aquatic and terrestrial species that are important to our way of life. And it was mentioned my relationship with Elder William Commanda. One of the things William talked about was the importance of the American eel, a species that once was abundant. It was actually quite abundant in the early 90s in the river that I live on. It's called the Mississippi. It flows into the Kitchissippi, or the Ottawa. And not so long ago, it thrived. It was it provided excellent protein, also excellent fats, all kinds of omega fats that are particularly healthy for us, and also as part of medicines were very important. But we didn't take good care of them, and I'll also get to that in a little while. But I just wanted to point out that treaties are not only with other people, they're also with other life forms. And in a treaty, we make a commitment. We express our intention. We make a commitment, a solemn promise. We make it with the purest intention that we can. So that means we prepare. We go into ceremony, and we express that intent, and we renew it. Very important, whether it's with other species or other human beings, that treaties are renewed. So long before European contact, the dish with one spoon treaty was established. It was established in particular for Haudenosaunee nations, at that time 5 of them, and the many Anishinaabeg nations. That treaty provided for the fact that there were cusp areas. I know Henry Lickers, the first Indigenous Commission with the International Joint Commission of the Great Lakes, and I used to do trainings under the Forest Stewardship Council. We talked about the 100-mile fuzzy boundary. Well, the fuzzy boundary, or the place where hunting and fishing might occur, and where there were ceremonies. So if I came in to that fuzzy boundary, but it was close to a Haudenosaunee village, I would practice the edge of the forest ceremony or the smoky fire ceremony. Essentially, that my hunting party or my fishing gathering party would stop, announce our presence, and then when people from the village approached us, or the settlement, then we would sit together. We might have shared ceremony, and we renewed our commitment to thinking about 7 generations hence, and our commitment to that web of life, that to take no more than what that web could sustain and renew. That when you go beyond that point, you can wipe out a species. You can create circumstances where this beautiful life in Algonquin, Mino Obaadjiwan, where that beautiful life can be interfered with, can be diminished. And it also creates other reverberations in terms of not living in harmony with the life around us. Essentially, natural law. And I'm thinking of a quote of Oren Lyon, actually on page 668 of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples' final report. And it's a law that he explains is associated with gathering water, eating, shelter, looking after our children, but doing so mindful of our spiritual connection to all of life, and that it's the one law that we can't violate without harming ourselves. And hence, a couple of treaties I'll talk about in a little while. Treaties on climate change, biodiversity, and for that matter, desertification happened because we violated the law. And ultimately, through long-term violation of natural law, we can wipe out human existence, or certainly experience extreme suffering. We're flirting with that circumstance now. So I will jump now to the Royal Proclamation of 1763. And at that time, King George III met with Privy Council because they had achieved colonial supremacy, but they were in danger of losing their colony to Indigenous warriors. So Pontiac, an Anishinaabe warrior, had taken 8 British forts. Seneca warriors had won a few military victories themselves, and there were other Indigenous activities that led the British to fear that things were slipping away. And so there was a debate in Privy Council between, do we go to war? Do we keep up the war? Or do we pursue peace? And so Sir William Johnson, who understood the friendship and peace treaties of both the Haudenosaunee peoples and the Anishinaabeg peoples. He had 8 children with Molly Brant, a Mohawk clan mother. He spoke several indigenous languages, and he knew the protocols to establish peace. So he did just that. And he pursued, he convinced King George to issue the proclamation. And in the proclamation, a line was drawn across what is now North America, but kind of, I would say, roughly speaking, running through mountains, the Adirondacks, the Appalachians, right through the south. And on one side of the line was indigenous territories that were not to be settled without the approval of indigenous nations. And even then, that approval was supposed to be overseen by the British to ensure that it was authentic. And I should have mentioned, oh yeah, so that's the proclamation. But the proclamation also set up for a treaty, an opportunity for First Nations from wide and far. And so in the winter of 1763 and 1764, Algonquin and Nipissing runners ran wampum strings to these First Nations, inviting them to the treaty process in July of 1764. And some of those representatives spent 3 months just traveling to Niagara for the treaty discussions. There were between 2,000 and 2,500 chiefs from 24 First Nations. Pardon me. They would have been prepared. And it makes me think about how we've studied this historical period through Western written iterations, but we haven't really contemplated what is the oral knowledge, and that oral knowledge was not lost. It was brought to the constitutional discussions in 1982. But so back then, the British Crown acknowledged the sovereignty of Indigenous nations. 24, as I think I may have already mentioned, nations showed up. And so they were prepared. They had issues. They were concerned about the rate that trees were being harvested and fish were being harvested, for example. They were concerned that the newcomers didn't really understand natural law and were attempting to violate it, which in deep cultural tradition of all the First Nations, this was not sustainable. It was not going to work. So those were issues that were raised early in the process. Sir William Johnson knew that those protocols included opening up in ceremony. So there was often pipe ceremonies, smudging from the Haudenosaunee, words before all else, which acknowledges and expresses gratitude for many, many species. In fact, that process alone can take a full day. But so that happened. There was accommodation for oral Indigenous knowledge systems, something that didn't happen much after that, but happened recently. So we'll get there. But so at the conclusion of the treaty process, there were wampum belts exchanged. The Crown knew how to create a wampum belt. And a wampum belt is actually a mechanism for passing on the oral tradition. They have a mnemonic effect. They remind us of what was said way back then. And they're also because of the prayers that go into them, the important connection between the heart and the mind. They carry a special purpose that we feel is also a spiritual purpose. I'm just going to mention very quickly that there were wampum belts before this. There was the Treaty of Montreal in 1701. There were wampum belts and gatherings and peace and friendship treaties among the Mi'kmaq and the Atlantic area. And there were also attempts to achieve peace. But until the European colonists sorted out who was the victor, those agreements, those understandings were not held up. So after the Treaty of 1764, there were a number of other treaties that built on the Treaty of 1764. And let me be clear, though, it wasn't the Treaty of 1764 wasn't all pretty. Sir William Johnson exerted his authority in some cases that was questionable, to say the least. And there were other dealings that where this idea of acknowledging sovereignty and agency, which had been expressed by King George, was on somewhat shaky ground. But it was enough that Indigenous nations, when it came to the American invasion in the War of 1812, were essential and served what may have been decisive strategic importance to pushing the Americans back and achieving, protecting what is now Canada. The treaty negotiations happened in Ghent, Belgium, and Article 9 acknowledged the rights of Indigenous peoples. But actually, Tecumseh, Indigenous warrior who is the leader of a coalition of Indigenous nations during the war, and General Brock, who headed up the British Army, actually carried each other's satchel in one case, and made solemn promises that should the British win the war, that what are now the Midwestern states and what are the prairie provinces would become a pan-Indian territory for Indigenous peoples. But the Americans, some things don't change. President Madison sent hawks and doves. The hawks came from the south, and Henry Clay, basically, though disliked by the American doves, prevailed. The British underestimated the tenacity of the American negotiators, and of course there were no Indigenous peoples there. But even Henry Clay knew they had to give something. So they gave Article 9, acknowledging what had been promised, but they didn't really provide an enforcement mechanism. And in my view, it was about that point. A Pledge of the Crown belt was handed over, created by the Crown, by actually Sir William Johnson's grandson, and who referred to the 7 Anishinaabeg gifts or laws or grandfather teachings, and referred to love, that it'll be our love and affection that get us through the difficult times ahead, and handed over the belt and assured the 23 First Nations, one didn't make it to that particular event, but assured them that the British Crown would uphold its solemn promise made in 1764. But really, shortly thereafter, the Privy Council even cooked up a scheme right here in Lanark County, as a matter of fact, to violate the proclamation, and brought in alcohol and got some chiefs, well, Indigenous people who weren't even from this area to put their X on a document and signed over 350,000 acres. We know from that period, you know, the 1816 until, well, there's the 1850s, but in particular with the Confederation in 1867, and then the Indian Act in 1876. We all people are waking up, in particular to some of the horrific manifestations of the attitude of the government of the day, which was to get rid of the Indian problem. And needless to say, the horrific circumstances associated with residential schools increasingly become unveiled to us. And at the end, I would like to acknowledge the 215 children found in Kamloops, but I'm going to save that for the end. So we went not only with the Indian Act, there was the outlawing of ceremonial practices. There was the corralling of Indigenous peoples, putting them on reserves, requiring a pass from the Indian agent to leave them, and many other stories of a breach of the Crown's integrity, big time. And so we went through these dark ages. There's much that could be said about them, but I actually I don't want to stay entirely focused there. I think there's a transformation that's happening, much heavy lifting to do, and I feel that I know that people like William Commanda, Jules Siwi, there were Haudenosaunee, who reached out internationally and attempted to bring integrity back, to say, hey, wait a minute, we have rights, and not only do we have rights, we know how to live on this land. Our ancestors left us with an important legacy, and it's important for everyone who shares this land that they listen to those voices, that they understand how to connect to the land. So people like Jules Siwi and William Commanda approached League of Nations, United Nations. Jules Siwi was charged with treason and fasted nearly to the death. But those were the early beginnings. There was a shift, and those incredible Indigenous leaders went through amazing challenges, upholding that the legacy of all of our ancestors. They knew those stories in great detail. Let me just kind of jump back. 50 years after the Royal Proclamation, and that was even more, treaties were being negotiated by the Crown on Manitoulin Island. And there was a chief who had been, as a young man, had been at the Treaty of 1764. And the negotiator had the paper with what was agreed and what was said. But this Anishinaabe chief recited in precise detail everything that he had on his paper. And so he was amazed at the efficacy of oral knowledge transmission. But it took until Dalgamu Supreme Court decision in the modern era, which recognize the validity, the efficacy, and in some cases, the supremacy of oral Indigenous knowledge transfer. So back to what I'm going to call the contemporary era, and I'm going to try and pay attention to the clock to make sure that we have ample time for questions and answers. So some of what was happening at the same time that human rights were being looked at. I actually have a good friend who has been putting these incredible pictures of the longest walk across North America. Just amazing. And there were all kinds of supporters. There was a group of Buddhists that made it all the way. There are a lot of allies. I'll put it that way. It was an amazing walk, and it raised the greater awareness about the circumstances for Indigenous peoples, and also the circumstances for the land that needed to change. There were a number of events. One of them I'm thinking of a paper written by Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Brundtland called The Limits to Growth. And in it, Gro Brundtland mentioned the importance of Indigenous peoples. There were meetings in Stockholm, all of which built momentum up for the Earth Summit in 1992. And Maurice Strong, a Canadian, was a key representative for the UN. And it was there that birth was given for the three conventions, namely climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification. It should be understood that desertification is not just sand dunes, it's topsoil loss. We've lost 25% of our topsoil since 1970. I had the great honor and privilege of attending the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with Indigenous delegation from Canada. We were also, we were really a delegation from North America. There's some pretty amazing elders there. One Inuit elder from Barrow, Alaska, he had us on stitches a lot of the time, but he was very wise too. There was just a lot of strength there. And it seemed to me that it was fast forward that the world had woken up and that we were going to finally take good care of our dear Mother Earth, who takes such good care of us. But as we all know, we've made some steps forward, but we've made many backwards too. In fact, climate change has gotten stronger, biodiversity loss has accelerated, and desertification hasn't been abated. So there was a vision and an understanding that Indigenous people's knowledge, ways of knowing, that is that oral knowledge transfer system, had to be part of the solution. And I was fully expecting that would happen, but actually it's hardly ever happened until recently, as a result of the 2010 Aichi targets. And among them, Target 18 is the full respect and inclusion, and when of their own volition, Indigenous peoples want to participate in the effective strategies that are addressing the other targets and the goals of the Convention on Biodiversity. So Canada, as a result of the 2010 targets, commissioned Pathways 1. And Pathways 1 looked at Canada's origin story and worked with an elder, Willie Ehrman, from the University of Saskatchewan, and Dr. Reg Crowshoe, Blackfoot elder from the University of Calgary, who coined the term ethical space. An ethical space is bringing together those Indigenous traditions, such as the 7 gifts or grandmother, grandfather laws, that includes love and humility and truth and courage, and brings those principles to governance. So that, and it also says that you build the relationship first. You don't jump ahead to what it is you're going to produce. You actually, it's not only what you're going to do, it's how you're going to do it. And so it actually went back to the kinds of relationships that were found in those peace and friendship treaties early in our history. And so a pipe ceremony was held on Maple Island to inaugurate the relationship. There were a steering committee representing the provinces, territories, and the feds. And then there was the Indigenous Circle of Experts, and there was the National Advisory Panel. I spent quite a bit of time with the National Advisory Panel, some with ICE as well. And but they worked, the two committees worked independently of each other. They pondered about what might the other be producing in terms of recommendations, but there until the very end, they worked independently. But in both cases, and including the steering committee, all meetings open in ceremony, open with a smudge. And Dr. Crowshoe referred to the fact that the smudge and gavel were equivalent to begin the meeting, and that Robert's Rules of Order and, for example, those 7 gifts were equivalent in terms of guiding a meeting. So that was a big part of it. The other part of ethical space was to bring in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, to bring in the 10 principles and the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and to be mindful of Indigenous protocols wherever the committees met. And so elders were brought into the process, and actually 4 prayer cloths from those meetings were brought to the end of the process. And I'll jump there in a minute. But so the National Advisory Panel included forestry, mining, agriculture, environmental non-government organizations, some Indigenous, and they came together. And I'm going to take a chance here, but and produce this diagram. You notice that the Earth is shaped like a heart, and that's because we need to not only process knowledge from a physical and a mental perspective, but also from an empathic perspective, from our heart, and from a spiritual perspective. That is, that the energy and that is within me is within all of life, and vice versa, and that it's ever changing. Everything is connected. And so out of the National Advisory Panel, which produced Canada's conservation vision. And by the way, these are easy to find online, and you can get them electronically. In the first recommendation, in the second and third bullet, it speaks about embracing Indigenous worldviews that acknowledge we are one species among many that share the earth with the rest of life. And then goes on to say, and this is, by the way, we recommend that all governments, so this is all orders of government in Canada, adopt a shared conservation vision that. And so the third bullet achieves our collective conservation goals within a framework of reconciliation and the creation of ethical space. So this is the vision that emerged from that diverse representation. It was amazing for me, and I got to participate in it more in a supportive role, but it was incredible to see these kinds of ideas emerge. And of course, the Indigenous Circle of Experts produced We Rise Together. Some great stuff there. But the one that I really, that probably is most near and dear to my heart was actually the report of the provincial, territorial, and federal governments. And it's called One with Nature, a renewed approach to land and freshwater conservation in Canada. And so they responded to the reports we have. I'm going to take a chance, but that's a picture of that opening pipe ceremony on Maple Island. And let me just read the last paragraph in Ethical Space, found on page 15 of One with Nature. Ethical Space has respectfully challenged our approaches and ways of knowing. And through guidance and protocols, we have a better understanding of how our knowledge systems become stronger through mutual recognition. Taking steps towards a paradigm shift comes with challenges, and we acknowledge that we must remain humble and reflect on our internalized practices to continue as good partners in our shared journey. It is through these experiences that we recognize ethical space as a gift, which has relevance extending beyond the pathway, and we hope to share this concept responsibly with others and continue to practice it in the work ahead. Well, I say Canada has a responsibility to bring it to the Convention of Parties the next time the world meets on climate change, on biodiversity, and on desertification. On biodiversity, that's anticipated to be in October in China. We'll see, but it's time to tell this story. Since that time, there's been the creation. What came out of it was the identification of Indigenous protected and conserved areas that partner with diverse partners, not just Indigenous partners. So Canada was meant to achieve 17% protected areas on terrestrial and freshwater. It's less than that in oceans. I think it was 10% for the oceans or ocean coastal areas. And now the targets are moving to 25% in 2025. And this is what will be discussed in China, and 30% in 2030. There's a lot to this story, but it's all about trying to protect some safe space for other species. But there are 18 other targets. There are the Sustainable Development Goals, which address social justice issues, address our responsibilities to water, to living a graceful and good life. And to get there, it's going to take a lot of hard work. I think it's going to take a major paradigm shift. And one of the things that, I'm looking at the clock, and I was trying to give a bit extra time. I was scheduled to wrap up in 10 or 11 minutes, so I'm going to wrap up in 2 or 3. And I want to say there's a lot more that could have been said about treaties, a lot more. We could talk, for a year with monthly meetings easily. So I apologize if I didn't touch some areas that people would like to have seen me touch. I'm certainly, there's definitely areas I'd love to have touched. But what's important right now is that there's no sovereignty if there's no Mother Earth. And so and I'm going to connect this to how out of hand things have gotten, but I think it's important to know that as horrifying as it is to find out about the 215 children in Kamloops, and I mentioned Dr. Reg Crowshoe, my cousin is a Indigenous counselor in an Indigenous clinic. The two of them actually in the early 90s did ceremony there, and a few other residential schools. And so some pretty powerful stories have been shared within my family, and I'm not going there too far right now. What I am going to say is that this idea of a superior culture, superior religion, superior human beings, which emerged with the papal bulls in 1493, existed before that, but it was formally enshrined. The fact is, I still see Western science and accomplished scientists. I saw it in Peru in 2016 at the World Biosphere Congress. And I thought I was going to go sit and watch, and I got right. I ended up having to challenge what had been worked on for 2 years. I was given 24 hours. I worked with the entire Canadian delegation to try to bring some balance, but I reminded everybody that they were violating treaties. They wanted to separate Western science and put it up on a pedestal, and take Indigenous ways of knowing and park it in a nice little corner and pat people on the head, but not take it seriously. That argument had long been dismissed. It was dismissed in 1992. This was 2016. And there are many examples. I've witnessed many of those examples. So we have to balance. I like to say it's balance the canoe. It's this supercilious attitudes are harming us all. And this whole idea of getting rid of the Indian problem, this whole superiority complex, and to go as far as experimenting with children, a doctor, Bryce, and there is this story, and should be known, but Dr. Bryce warned Parliament. He actually did research and was astounded at the living conditions for Indigenous children in residential schools. And what did Parliament do? They wouldn't let him formally publish his report, and they terminated him and put him out to pasture. But he went and produced a report anyway. I know Cindy Blackstone, who took the federal government to court around child welfare unfairness and inappropriate funding, has recently applauded Dr. Bryce, and wants Canadians to know there were people back then who stood up for what was right. Well, we're faced with similar challenges. Some of the some of that attitude still exists, and some of the way we conduct our relationships on this land, the way we conduct our economies, the way we conduct, manifest our business in many ways needs to change. And if it does change, it'll be better for all of us. So I think it's important not only to think about each and every child whose life was taken from them, but also think about the harm that still exists from the kind of attitude that created the circumstances where that could happen under Parliament's watch. So it's important. We're all treaty people. We all need to work together. We all need to address our responsibilities to the continuation of life, and to remember things like those 7 gifts, those simple principles that are part of ethical space. It's important. I'm going to wrap things up by saying this. It's important that there's accommodation for both what I'll call the Western written knowledge transfer system and the oral Indigenous knowledge transfer system, that we stop and we make sure that when we're working together that we're truly accommodating each system, not marching ahead with our own goals, no matter how laudable they may seem. So with that, I thank all of you for listening. Time flew by. I had much more to say, but I want to give those of you who are listening right now an opportunity to ask some questions. So with that, Warden Lowry, I'll pass the feather back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Elder Larry. I don't know if we want to take a minute or two to have Joanna or Emily come on and talk about Plenty Canada before we get into questions. And that'll just give people a few minutes to type their questions into that Q&A box. So we'll just wait and see if Emily or Joanna join us here. There's Joanna. Do you want to take a few minutes and talk about Plenty Canada?
Sure, that would be great. We had prepared some slides, but I'm not sure whether that will work with the translation. Perhaps we'll just give that a quick test and see.
I think that we can because they are pinned now, but you can try it.
Okay, let's try. And maybe the audience could let us know in the comments, in the chat, whether or not they're able to see the translators. Great.
Seems good.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to share. We have a number of exciting youth opportunities that are coming up as part of our land-based learning programming that we've been continuing to develop. First one is the Youth Circle for Mother Earth. So Plenty Canada has partnered with 3 other organizations, Trent University, Walpole Island Land Trust, and Ontario Nature, to support this collaborative of Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth aged 15 to 27 from across Ontario. And these youth are working together on activities within their communities. They get together once a month for Tea Time Tuesdays, and it's a really wonderful group. So if you know of anyone who might be interested in joining, please point them our way. We'd love to hear from them, and nominations are open. And also, if you know of someone who might be interested in participating in some upcoming events that they're organizing, there is going to be a BioBlitz that'll be happening in the month of July. It's over the course of a couple of weeks, but we will be having an in-person event, if everything goes as we hope, on July 24th. There's also going to be a youth summit happening with YCME in the month of September. So lots of exciting things happening around this very particular program. And information about that is available on our website. We also have another youth program which is currently underway, and this one is a little bit different. It's a program where youth aged 15 to 30 will have a chance to participate in monthly workshops, including this birch bark canoe workshop. You'll see the photo here of everyone with their birch bark canoes at home. It was offered by Master Birch Bark Builder Chuck Commanda. We had others like improv workshops with comedians Stephanie Pengowish and many other wonderful luminaries, Indigenous luminaries. So these workshops happen each month over the course of 9 months for this year's version. And meanwhile, participants are provided with support for their own community projects. It's been really well received by participants, and we are accepting applications at this point with priority to local youth, but we are also accepting applications from youth elsewhere, as we will be offering this largely online once again due to the pandemic. So more information is available at our website. And you can also get a hold of us by email. I believe that Emily will be putting some of those details into the chat for you to see. And there's one further project that we would love to share with the rest of you. And it's a fundraising initiative that Emily will tell you about.
Yeah, hi. So I'm just going to say a quick word about this. It's a really cool fundraising project that we're a part of right now that's run by Canada Helps. So up until the end of June, every dollar that you donate to us through Canada Helps gives us a chance to win a $20,000 prize. And what we're raising money for right now is to do some updates on our grounds. So we've been working on some sustainable renovations. And once we have completed all of this, we are going to be able to have more space to run Indigenous-led environmental and other types of programs. So for all ages, for school groups, community groups, etc. So there is a link here where you can go to the donation page. And if you want to see any more details and some info about how the project is going and get updates, I am going to post in the chat here just a few links to our social media and to the donation page.
And that's all from us. Thanks so much.
All right, well, thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Emily. I'm just going to get into the Q&A. I see that there are people writing questions in the chat. I'll fish them out of there too, but it is a little easier for us to see them on the Q&A box if you can type them in there. So Larry, our first question is, it's curious, what would Indigenous governance look like without treaties? And this is a question from Paula McDonald.
Okay, Indigenous governance without treaties. Well, that's almost hard to conceive, given the kinds of treaties that I mentioned in the beginning. But I think I understand where the question's coming from. Well, really, there were lots of different iterations of Indigenous governance. You know, there's the clan system. There was the Haudenosaunee have a governance system that has continuity from long before contact. Anishinaabeg governance was less centralized, and there was, you know, sometimes anthropologists make judgments about what's the most sophisticated governance system. So Anishinaabe governance was more related to the land. to not overusing the land. So there were familial hunting territories. There were clan-based hunting territories. People came together in the summer, made decisions about the land, about hunting protocols. Rivers were considered commons. So when you're traveling, you could fish, you could camp on the shore, but if you're harvesting wildlife, then you had to get permission from the families whose territory that was. That was all part of the governance system. So the governance system was much more dictated by the environment and the relationship to the environment. I hope that answers your question. I'm thinking about some good friends of mine who have written on the topic, including Jose Barrero, who wrote a book called Roots of American Democracy. And I highly recommend it. I have a feeling that might be the direction that you're interested in. But okay, I'll take the next question.
Sure. So the next one, it's about treaty and treaties, and it's from Tracy Julian. She's wondering if you could talk about the treaty or treaties that cover Lanark County.
Well, the Treaty of 1764, when we say we're all treaty people, there are a few places like Eastern Ontario and more than that, Western Quebec. The Algonquins never had a treaty in the sense of what we now know as a comprehensive treaty, but the Treaty of Niagara set up the relationship for Indigenous peoples and newcomers at the time, Europeans, but for everybody that's come since that time. So so that's where the treaty is. There's that treaty that's referred to when I go out west. Indigenous peoples understand the dish with one spoon, the covenant chain, which were all part of the Treaty of Niagara, and that relationship building around how land would be shared. So so that has impact in those territories that don't have a specific treaty at the moment. And then, as I've pointed out, I feel we're all of us are committed to the treaties on climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification. But unfortunately, even though in 1992, Agenda 21 was meant to really anchor things locally. And you have some countries like Finland and others where at the municipal level, they actually run the show. And they provide annual reports. And, you know, if there's a deficit, then the federal government, deficit in terms of achieving goals, then they expect the federal government to come up with policies that help local communities achieve those goals. So it's grassroots driven. It's bottom up rather than top down. And that's, you know, I actually feel that's part of those original treaties. And I think the day is going to come real soon when we're going to have to take those treaties a lot more seriously.
So, Elder Larry, I have a couple questions that are pretty related to what we were just hearing, and it's regarding unceded territories. Is it possible to create a new territory, for example, the area around Ottawa? And then the second part to that, for some lands with treaties, excuse me, can they be supported? Can they support unsurrendered land? Like, could that take in new? Could one treaty area take in new unsurrendered areas?
I think the answer is yes, but that's triggering something for me. I know, for example, in Algonquin territory, we often say unceded territory. And I know First Nations with treaties say, well, we didn't cede the land. What we did is we set up a relationship. We agreed to share the land on the terms of the treaty. So, you know, are there possibilities in terms of other Indigenous-led land relationships? Well, absolutely. Indigenous protected and conserved areas, there are provinces that are looking at this issue and creating legislation to allow for more flexibility and for Indigenous peoples to take a leadership role in those protected areas that would be developed or would be organized for the benefit of all well, in all cases, and would also be part of our fulfilling our treaty obligations under the Convention on Biological Diversity. I know the provincial government in Ontario has just announced a process. I know in places like the Northwest Territories, they've created innovative and progressive legislation to allow a lot more flexibility about how lands would fit in treaties. And it should be understood, there's reserves and then there's territories. And the territories are much bigger than the reserves, whether there's a treaty, comprehensive treaty or not. So yeah, there is a lot of flexibility. I'm trying to, I think that's a very important question. And there's so many nuances to it. It's difficult to give you a nice, clean, simple answer. Other than I think it's important that all of us understand those possibilities and push for more flexibility in terms of creating creating IPCAs, Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas, under the Convention on Biological Diversity. It's a big issue. The only way we'll ever achieve 30% by 2030 is to be creative along the lines that you're pointing to.
So the next question is from Ramsey Hart, and he's asking if you could clarify why many treaty maps show Eastern Ontario as being covered by historic land treaties.
Covered by historic land treaties. Well, I'm not sure what map you're looking at, but there was part of the early breaches of the proclamation were ultimately deemed illegal, and that's why there's comprehensive land claim discussions going on as we speak. By the way, hello, Ramsey.
So the next one is from Laura, and I hope I'm saying your last name right, Laura Flugel. And her question is, there really a way forward under the current Canadian state, since the relationship has had issues since the founding of Canada? Absolutely.
Absolutely there is. One of the things I discovered, we as a Ontario Human Rights Commissioner, is we had the youngest commissioner was African Canadian. She had kids, mine were long gone from home by that time, but she had kids in grade 3 and 6. And those grades happened to be the grades where kids got some exposure to Indigenous culture in Ontario. She was so appalled by the content that she brought them to the commission, and it triggered the exercising of our powers to investigate. And I'll just say that I think it set wheels in motion along with pressure elsewhere to revisit Canadian curriculum. And I know that we've had summer students come here for a long time. And we had a summer student who is a teacher. And she came from one of the high schools in Lanark County, not all that long ago. I'm going to say maybe 6 or 7 years. I'd never, ever heard of residential schools at all. And many Canadians have no idea of our shared history, have no idea how we came together, why we came together, what were the terms, what were the promises, and what have the violations been. So it's hard to reconcile with circumstances that are unacceptable if you don't know about those unacceptable circumstances. So learning about our history, continuing to advance the curriculum, and actually they disbanded a committee that was responsible for improving the curriculum in Ontario, but individual school boards are doing some great things. By the way, I'm highly impressed with the Upper Canada District School Board, for example, and some great things, of course, happening in the Niagara School District. And I know just yesterday, I'm not sure how much I can announce this, but I'll just say a prominent broadcaster and her husband are contributing to a book of the history of Niagara, which of course deals with the treaty that deals with the War of 1812. And so it's a book designed to support students academically, knowing our history better. But also it will be designed to be available to the general public. And I know the lead author on this one is an incredible historian, Tuscarora historian, and I know it'll be a great book. I see a number of those kind of efforts happening, but the education deficit is huge, and it's really holding us back. So, I mean, I quite frankly, I'm on Facebook, and I was in both represented my First Nation and my municipality for a long period of time, and some of the stuff that I've seen that is fraught with negative stereotypes, etc. Not understanding, for example, why Tyendinaga was blocking the railroad in solidarity with what is really a treaty breach. Without knowing that history, it's hard to understand motivations of Indigenous peoples to demand justice. So, and I really feel if all Canadians understood the deficit around the child welfare system and the education system. For example, a student on reserve is going to receive about half the support financially out of public monies that somebody off reserve will receive. So, you know, there's some glaring inequities and symptoms of the past that we've got to work on together.
So I think we'll all probably be watching for the book or the information that'll be coming out that we're maybe not supposed to know about just yet, but we'll be watching for that.
Yeah, I just heard about it yesterday, and I'm not, you know how announcements go. Warden Lowry, you gotta make sure you're on in harmony with the full team. So
Yeah, there you go. So there's a question here from Susan McCauley, and it falls right into what you were just saying, Elder Larry. And she says, as an adult Canadian, I feel sad and cheated that I knew virtually nothing about Indigenous history until the last few years. And she's directing this to Plenty Canada, but I imagine you might have some further comments. How about a program that matches non-Indigenous older adults with Indigenous elders to just talk about our collective history? Do you have any thoughts on that?
oh yeah. So there are groups. I mean, right here in Lanark County, we have Ramsey Hart, who asked me a question earlier, is in the middle of that, as are many others. So you have Lanark County Neighbors for Truth and Reconciliation. That's one example. There are other examples. I know at Plenty Canada, we're talking with people like, one of our senior advisors is Tim Johnson. He was the director of the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, the Smithsonian Museum. The person that wrote Roots of American Democracy oversees our programs in Peru, Guatemala, and Cuba. He was the senior editor of Akwesasne Notes. Now you got to be an old timer to remember them and that publication, but it was huge in its day. And Tim was senior editor of Indian Country Today, the largest Indigenous newspaper in the world. This group of people is talking about your very question and the need to do webinars on key themes. I'm also going to recommend Celebration of Nations out of St. Catharines. Here again, Tim Johnson is one of the leaders. I know this year's theme is Seeking Wisdom, and already there's a lineup that's pretty amazing in terms of speakers speaking on that theme. But back to Plenty Canada, back to some of the connections that I was alluding to. There's also several women, Gudgie Cook, Mohawk midwife, doing great work, and women leaders in places like Guatemala, Peru. So we did one webinar. It was amazing, and we had some of those leaders in Peru and Guatemala at the time. We intend to do things around some of these themes. Happy to hear from people what they'd like to learn about, but we intend in the next few months to set up webinars that happen periodically within our capacity to pull them off, I'm going to say professionally, or maybe more accurately, effectively, good content, good resources, and indisputable in terms of the kind of factual content. So that is in the works. Thematically, we're discussing different subjects that are that we think would be important to people.
Thanks, Elder Larry. Our next one is from Patricia Coder, and it's about water rights. What can all people in our communities do together now to save the USA from buying our water rights from the government? Would it not be better for we peoples who believe in caring for rivers and streams to be on the same page? How do we get there?
Yeah, well,
big question.
Yeah, very important question. So I didn't explain my opening comments, but I said Chimikwich Nibi. Nibi is water. Water makes up the majority of our bodies. And I am flabbergasted at how we treat water. The ocean is just a big toilet. And you know, I see source water protection, but I sat on the Ontario Recovery Strategy team for the American eel, also for the National Recovery Team. What we found by researching toxicology studies of the American eel were done by a professor at Queen's. There were two professors there that were amazing, good people. And by the way, the recovery strategy in terms of what Albert Marshall refers to as two-eyed seeing, Western science, indigenous ways of knowing, bringing that together. So these scientists spent time in ceremonies with our elders, but what did we discover? Well, the toxicology studies pinpointed how much toxins we're putting into our water. And I got to tell you, a big part of it is coming from what I don't like to even, I find it difficult to say the truth. And the truth is it's coming from our agricultural system. I assumed that it was coming from industry, but some of it is, but the majority is just coming from the way we're treating the land. And, you know, it's not working. It's creating all kinds of health impacts, be it cancer, you name it. The studies are there. I mean, even the Ontario College of Family Physicians have done very good studies that are ignored politically and really ignored by the rest of us. Yeah, in terms of, so that's the big issue for me. But yes, water diversion and looking at, I was reading, I mean, hey, I'm watching the Montreal Canadiens and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. Read about Las Vegas. It's grown 65% or more in a very short period of time. It's pushing out into the desert. The water demands are unsustainable. So some of this crazy development that's going on, I mean, could probably name many other places, but the Southwest U.S. Was built on foolish notions of water management. So they've drained massive aquifers, and yeah, there'll be pressure on Canada for water. Yeah, that's a big issue that I don't have much in the way of brilliant solutions, other than hopefully we all learn to work more with the environment we're in, and we begin to accept that there are development limits. And right now, I'm not seeing that we're accepting development limits really anywhere. So that's a big issue. That's one of the symptoms of collectively how we're approaching our relationship to the earth in North America. And it speaks to the collective challenges we have to slow down and find a way that is more sustainable. Start thinking about 7 generations to come. Right now, we're going downhill rapidly when you look at North America as a whole.
Thanks, Elder Larry. I'm just going to take a short moment here. The Mississippi Mills Online Relation group would like to know how many of the participants this evening are using the services of the interpreters. So the way that we can try to get that information, because we can't see you, you can see us, but we can't see you. If you could go to the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise hand button, a little yellow raise hand button. And if you can use that raise hand button so we can identify you, that would be helpful for the organizers, the online relation organizers. So we'll just give a second. I can see, I think 3 right now. Just give a minute for everyone to find that yellow button. Perfect. Thank you. Oh, we have 4. Perfect. Thank you very much. For those of you who have identified yourself, you can put your hands down now. Thank you very much for that. There's still lots of time if anyone wants to ask some questions to Elder Larry. I do have a question myself for you, and it goes along with the theme that you were just talking about. And something that you had said earlier kind of stuck with me, and it's there is no sovereignty if there's no Mother Earth. And what jumped in my mind as you were talking about us needing to be really foremost thinking about, you know, we have our one place, we have Mother Earth. Do you have thoughts about how we could be making changes at all 3 levels of government, in terms of building, in terms of planning, in terms of green infrastructure, net zero development, excuse me. Do you have thoughts about that you could share with us?
Well, I'm going to start by saying at 9 o'clock on TVO, Douglas Cardinal and, another Indigenous architect are speaking. The building I'm sitting in right now, the renovations were designed by Douglas Cardinal. So we're using materials, they're not always the cheapest today when you go to purchase them. But in terms of the lifespan of the building, they even have a fiscal performance that exceeds other materials. And much to my chagrin, some of those materials, there's this green wafer board, has 0 carbon impact producing it. It has a huge R factor. And yeah, I'm thinking of all kinds of materials, and we have some information. We have kind of, one of those wafer slices that shows each layer and explains their performance. So I think one of the most important things we can do in our societies is change the building code. The building code has got to get with the program. We're still building large buildings that their energy efficiency is relatively poor, high carbon input in producing them, lots of residual toxic impacts in producing them. All of that's got to change. We have the smarts. It's not like we've got to invent something new. We actually have the smarts. And we had a young student. First, she pursued a degree in environmental sciences. Then she went to Perth and took heritage carpentry. And she helped, she wrote the successful grant using Douglas Cardinal's vision. You'll see we're going to demonstrate a number of different solar applications. There's microfit, all of that goes into the grid and then you get paid for it. Then there's net metering, where your surplus goes to the grid and you get credit. And then we'll have a backup off the grid system. We will we'll keep data on it and share that with anybody so that they get some sense of what kind of systems they might want to put together for themselves. The same with the building information. It's our intent that this is a demonstration center. So we will share information on those building materials. We also have funding this one's going to be challenging. Right now, for me, the building code, I noticed this when I was mayor, that it was the provincial regulation system that did not allow for the kinds of innovations I saw happening in other provinces. So, cheaper, more environmentally progressive technology was approved there. Here, they're reluctant to do it, and there's several reasons why. So we actually, you got places like Trent that have an ecology house. We have some funding where we want to do rainwater capture, gray water recycling, and innovative black water processing. The key, the big challenge will be dealing with building inspector. And to understand that what we're trying to do is actually progressive, will have less impact, and opens the door and moves us in a direction for everyone else to look at alternatives that are more effective in protecting our water, which you know, from an Indigenous perspective is sacred. Whatever you do, you look after that water. People like William Commanda, I've heard this from many other elders, talked about our rivers as the arteries of our Mother Earth, the veins. And when you look at it in that kind of terminology, we've got to come up with technologies that are much better that way. I did sit on the Royal Commission for Land Use Planning Reform in the 90s, the Ontario Smart Growth Panel. And I was kind of the environmental guy on the Ontario Smart Growth Panel. But I look at the kinds of things that we're looking at the same time that I see very progressive ideas emerging, but in little clusters. You know, I'm going to say around North America, but really around the world. There's some great stuff going on. We just haven't prioritized it. And so I feel that land use planning has got to change. I see us bending to this idea of individual property rights that are killing us, that are using land we shouldn't be using, or using it in inappropriate ways. You know, the science is there. It's just, but it's very, very difficult. I got asked this in the Muskoka conference. I'm going to be honest, I was probably more outspoken. So you know, but it's an excellent question, extremely important. It really comes down to, again, our relationship with the land. That is everything. That's where, when we're talking about 7 generations to come, it's the relationship with the land. So, you know, we might bend the rules a little bit. You know, they've just got this little lot. I know when I was mayor and we did our official plan update, we, especially after amalgamation, we had these really little lots near lakes, and we felt, oh, we just had to, we couldn't say no there. In the future, we would. Well, the long-term legacy of developing lots that are inappropriate for development is the contamination of water, is the impact of quality of life for everybody else, and it becomes death by 1,000 cuts. It's one situation by itself, not that big a deal, but it's the collective impact in a whole watershed. Several municipalities kind of, you know, yielding to, they kind of know what's right, but oh, it won't matter that much this time. Yeah, that attitude is not, it's just not appropriate. It's not working for us. I think there's more to that issue. I think there's so much we can do in the area of building. I'm thinking of Lindy, who wrote our grant, and you know, a young person with a lot of vision. There are young people out there. I have a niece and her Cree Métis boyfriend. He's studying architectural technology at Mohawk College in Hamilton, and they're really looking at that water. They're really looking at the built environment and what should be done. They're really looking at not only the fact that it's the right materials, it's also quality workmanship. That you've got to build a building so that it lasts a long time. And if you don't, if you're in a rush, if you cut corners, which happens in the building trades sometimes, then there's a price to pay environmentally for that.
Well, I think we need to wrap it up there. Elder Larry, I think this has been your presentation. It was excellent, and I think really sparked some great discussion as well. So I see Bev has popped on, so I'm going to pop off and I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Warden Lowry, and thank you, Elder Larry. Also, I'd like to say Shay Miigwech to the sign language interpreters. Thank you so much. And embodying the communication tonight. Also, a little update through the donation associated with everyone's registration, we'll be able to give approximately $400 to Plenty Canada for their youth programs to support those programs, which do look fantastic. And I also want to thank Joanna and Emily from Plenty Canada for being our Zoom hosts tonight. And I want to thank all of you from all over Canada for attending. We're going to send a survey out in a couple of weeks. We're interested in what other topics people like to see, would like to see in this kind of format. What do you want to know more about? And because one of the things that we really our mission is to help with education, and some of it may be introducing information to people for the first time. Some may be more conversations, expanding our knowledge. But please respond to us, to our survey when we send it to you. And I would say that through this evening, we are a step closer to renewing our friendship. And finally, just to leave you with the image, I'm going to leave you with the image of Joe By. So Joe By, that most excellent fiddler, hosting people at their home all around. This is before TV and before a lot of stuff. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 70 years ago, or maybe even 100 years ago, since we're talking great-grandmothers and great-grandmothers here in that generation. And so the evening is over, and the people, they're out, they're hooking up their horses, that little horse, the little driving buggy horse that Warden Lowry's grandmother was given, ultimately. Getting hooked up, everybody's getting all their things. They're bringing home the pots that they brought their clothes. Oh, someone says they can't hear me very well. I hope you can hear me. So the evening is over. Everybody's getting into their buggies, and they're all starting to wave. And it's time for us to wave, because we're saying goodbye for now to our friends. We hope to see you again. And thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now.